Hey there. Thanks for bringing these really interesting sources our way. It feels like we're diving into something that's pretty universal, right? It's that search for some kind of peace, some moral clarity when the world feels, well, a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like stumbling onto the set of, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Oh, I
Galaxy.
love that.
It's
Yeah.
like, something massive is happening, maybe even a little absurd, and you're just trying to figure out where you stand.
Absolutely.
So today, we're not dealing with hard facts or ideologies, just exploring ideas.
Right.
Think freely with us. Think openly.
This feeling of being overwhelmed by challenges, it isn't new. I mean, throughout history, people have always faced moments that felt huge and confusing.
Right.
And in those moments, we're always forced back to this question. How do we act with integrity? How do
Yeah.
we actually make a difference?
Yeah. And that's exactly where we land today, on the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi. He's like our guide for this deep dive. And his whole life, his philosophy, offered a really potent way to challenge injustice and to do it without resorting to violence.
Absolutely.
And this isn't about a dusty history lesson, right?
Right.
It's about exploring principles that might actually give us a fresh perspective, help us navigate the complexities we all face today.
Absolutely. I think that's key.
So our mission, using the sources you shared with us, is to really understand how can Gandhi's principles provide a framework
Yeah.
for navigating conflict and seeking change peacefully. We want to get to the heart of like the how and the why of his approach.
So let's go back to that feeling you mentioned, that sense of something big, something maybe even a bit sinister unfolding.
Right.
It's natural to feel like if you want to make a big change, you need to take big, forceful action. But one of the sources you shared, it dives into the nature of war.
Hmm.
And it makes this, I think, really stark observation. That war, in all its forms, it always comes back to combat. Even if it's not like hand-to-hand fighting, right? The
Right.
idea of armed force, it's always there, lurking beneath the surface.
Yeah, that's such a crucial point to start with. If we're talking about finding peace in protest, it makes you see that there's this fork in the road, violence or nonviolent resistance.
Yeah.
One is all about confrontation. The other is trying to completely transform the conflict itself by completely different means.
Absolutely. And that takes us right to the core of Gandhi's philosophy.
Yeah.
Satyagraha.
Yeah.
It's a word we hear a lot, but what did it really mean to him?
Yeah.
At its heart, Satyagraha means truth force, soul force. It's not just passively accepting what's wrong.
Right.
It's an act of philosophy, it's a practice, and it's about nonviolent resistance. It's a way to oppose injustice and to really seek the truth. I mean, Gandhi deeply believed that truth and love, these are the most potent forces in the universe. By holding on to these principles, even when you're facing huge oppression, you can bring about real change.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and this wasn't just some theory for him.
Yeah.
He put Satyagraha into action. You shared some documents about the Satyagraha movement in Transvaal in South Africa.
Yes.
What struck me was that even when people like his wife, Kasturba Gandhi, and a small group of really dedicated people were arrested for protesting, the movement didn't stop. It kept going.
It's so interesting that historical context really does highlight the power of nonviolent action, right?
It does.
And it brings us to something that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in his letter from Birmingham jail, right?
Yeah.
He said that freedom is never something the oppressor just gives up.
Right.
It has to be demanded by the oppressed.
And he goes on to say, in that same letter, we need to find a new way. Something between passively accepting injustice and the bitterness and hatred that can lead to violence. He called it a more excellent way, built on love and nonviolent protest. I mean, it's like Gandhi had already started down that path decades before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's completely opposite to, like, Machiavelli, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You included some of his writings, The Prince. And it's fascinating to see how completely different their approaches were.
Machiavelli was all about practicality, effectiveness above all else. Even if it meant ignoring what we think of as traditional morals, he'd say, like, the ends justify the means.
Right. Better to be feared than loved.
Exactly. It's almost a clinical approach to leadership.
Right.
Gandhi was coming from a totally different place. For him, the means and the ends were inseparable. Moral integrity was at the foundation of Satyagraha.
It wasn't just a side note.
Not at all. It was central. The power of Satyagraha, as he saw it, was that it never wavered from truth and nonviolence. It appealed to the conscience of the oppressor, trying to change their understanding, not just force them into submission. The difference is so clear. Machiavelli is all about results no matter what. Gandhi insists that the methods themselves must be moral if you want to create real change.
So how do you actually put that into action? How do you live that more excellent way when you're facing real injustice?
Well, one of the key principles of Satyagraha is the willingness to embrace self-suffering. Gandhi believed that by enduring hardship without violence, you could awaken the conscience of the oppressor,
Hmm.
and you could show how just your cause really was. It wasn't about liking pain or anything like that. It was a deliberate choice to bear the burden of resistance without striking back. It was a way of revealing the moral hollowness of the oppressor, forcing them to confront the truth.
That's so powerful. It really ties in with this idea that even when pain feels huge, you can meet it with inner strength. It's not about ignoring it, but finding a way to make it an act of resistance.
Like a form of resilience.
It's like saying, you can hurt me, but you can't break me.
Exactly. It's about holding on to your values no matter what. And, one of the sources you shared points out that this is what real leadership is built on.
Hmm.
Gandhi's unwavering commitment to nonviolence, even when facing brutal oppression, it's a
Mhm.
perfect example. His moral authority came directly from living his values every single day.
It makes you wonder where that kind of inner strength comes from, to keep going like that.
It's interesting, right? The Gandhi excerpts don't go into detail about that, but one of the other sources about Zen Buddhism talks about self-settle. It's this idea of acting spontaneously from a place of inner peace. Now, I know Gandhi wasn't a Zen Buddhist, but the principle, I think, is very similar. It's about finding stillness within yourself so that you can act with clarity and commitment, even when everything around you is chaotic. You act from a place of peace, not just for it.
Like finding a quiet center in the middle of a storm.
Exactly. And there's also this idea of non-attachment. It's a Buddhist concept that comes up in a few of your sources. It's not exactly the same as Satyagraha, but the idea of being detached from specific outcomes while still being fully committed to what you're doing, it can be so powerful.
Especially when you're facing suffering.
Absolutely. It lets you act with conviction without needing a particular result.
Because needing a specific result can lead you to compromise or even despair if you don't get it.
Exactly.
And I can't imagine trying to sustain any kind of protest, peaceful or otherwise, completely alone. It feels like community has to be a huge part of it.
Totally. The Gandhi excerpts don't focus just on community,
Right.
but it's a natural part of his ideas about collective action and shared values. When if people share beliefs, when they support each other, when they feel like they belong to something bigger, it can really help prevent burnout. It affirms everyone's struggles, and ultimately, it makes the movement stronger.
Right.
And the shared experience of self-suffering, it creates these incredibly strong bonds within the community.
It's really important to remember, though, that even nonviolent resistance has its limits.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of your sources make that clear, like in Letter from Birmingham Jail and even in The Wretched of the Earth. Oppressors rarely just give up power.
That's right.
Sometimes there's this hope that people will do the right thing just because it's right,
Yeah,
but it's often much more complicated than that.
absolutely. Your sources remind us that even people who say they believe in equality might still expect the oppressed to be nonviolent, while they themselves benefit from the systems that cause the oppression in the first place.
Right. And just to be super clear, like we said at the start, we're not here to pick sides or push an ideology. We're just trying to understand the framework that Gandhi offered for finding moral clarity and pursuing peace in the face of conflict.
Exactly, using the material you brought to us.
Right. So to wrap things up, Gandhi's philosophy of Satyagraha offers a powerful way to think about peaceful protest.
It's deeply rooted in moral clarity, and it requires tremendous inner strength.
It shows us the power of truth and the potential of self-suffering, and it completely rejects violence as a way to achieve justice.
So for you, our listener, who brought these ideas to us, we hope this has given you some things to think about and act on. Gandhi's principles, although they came from a particular time and place, they still offer guidance and inspiration. They can help you navigate conflicts and advocate for change in your own life and in your community.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a final thought for you to consider. In today's world, how can small, maybe even seemingly insignificant acts of resistance, if they're grounded in moral conviction and supported by community, how can those small acts embody the spirit of Satyagraha?
It's about looking beyond the big gestures, the grand actions, and recognizing the inherent power in doing what you believe is right, no matter how small it might seem.
We encourage you to really think about how these ideas play out in your own life. What possibilities might they open up for you?
What avenues for peaceful, principled engagement might they reveal?
Thanks for being here with us today, and keep thinking freely.
And openly.